In the last year or so, I received a fair bit of requests to highlight some of George Lynch's excellent guitar work, and being a fan of George myself, I thought a good place to start would be the solo to Dokken's In My Dreams. Now, of course, there are a lot of George Lynch solos that are worth a closer look, but I picked this one for two reasons. First of all, I think it's one that is suited to players of different skill and experience, but still a little challenging, and definitely interesting when it comes to style and composition. The second reason is that I consider Under Lock and Key to be the album where the various defining elements of George's very recognizable playing style came together. And I think In My Dreams is both the most well-known track from that album and the one that most features his signature markers. This video was actually shot before we decided to make everything just one channel. So we figured we'd just reshoot the intro, and since I wasn't happy with the way I played the solo on the original video, I took advantage of the situation to reshoot that as well. But everything from this point on will be from the original video. So let's get to it, and I really hope you'll enjoy this breakdown and analysis of George's fantastic solo. This solo is a little bit different from the other ones that we looked at on this channel, as it's not the song within a song type of solo. Instead, this one is more of a standard lead break where the purpose is to fill another verse or chorus while featuring something other than the lead vocal, generally the guitar. In this case, the solo is played over the chords of the chorus and then those of the pre-chorus before going back to the main riff as sort of a breakdown before the final chorus. Now, soloing over the rhythm parts of the chorus and then the pre-chorus is a bit of an unusual arrangement, and it lays the foundation for a really cool solo. So let's look at those chords real quick. It's basically all power chords, and the first part is E, C, B, and E over 2 bars. And that repeats 3 times, and then the 4th time it's E and C for 1 bar, and then just D as a whole note over the entire 2nd bar. So the second section of the solo is also a 2-bar pattern where the E chord rings for 1 bar and then the 2nd bar is D and A, both played as half notes. So you play that 3 times and then it goes to D and A before going back to the riff. So that part goes like this. The rhythm is really interesting too, because on the first section, they're always anticipating the beat on every second chord change. So the first E and then the B chord are played on the 1, and the C and the second E are played on the end of 4. And then on the second half, the chord changes are all on the downbeat, except for the very end. And I've said this before in other videos, but it's true of many great solos. The rhythm section always plays a fundamental role in any memorable solo. Okay, now we can look at George's wacky licks, how they work within that accompaniment, and why this solo gets stuck in your head the way it does. So most of what he's playing is based on the E natural minor scale, also known as the Aeolian mode, which is probably the most commonly used mode in heavy metal. However, with George, it's rarely the usual boxy shapes, and he often plays in multiple positions on the neck, covering several octaves. And of course, he uses slides, stretches, creative shapes, and well-placed chromatics to keep things sounding fresh and interesting. George starts his solo with this very recognizable lick. And if it sounds familiar to you, that's because it is. It's basically the same intro as Eddie Van Halen's Beat It solo, which was released nearly 3 years prior. I don't know whether it was an intentional paraphrasing or it just came out spontaneously because it was in his mind somewhere, or even if someone at Elektra Records suggested he do something like that because this song was expected to be a successful single. Either way, I've never had a problem with people borrowing licks or ideas. Musicians all learn from one another. And I think it's a really cool lick that fits the song perfectly, and it's a great start to the solo. What, did I play that wrong? I didn't do it right? You think I should have done Dream Warriors? I know. I probably have. I'll do Dream Warriors another time. Okay. Next, he goes into this really cool pedal point lick. Now for me, these are some of the most fun things to play on a classic heavy metal track. You know, it comes so naturally when you pick up a guitar with a high gain tone to do these palm muted pedal point things with a nice squeal or two as punctuation. And of course, a nice wide vibrato is essential on that last note to really make it count. Even on a simple lick like this, you can see how a guy like George Lynch has a great melodic and harmonic sense that sets him apart from your average guitar player. It's all Aeolian, but then instead of playing this with the minor seventh, as one would if they were to stay within the scale, he does this. So he's substituting the minor seventh with a major seventh, which sounds so much better. And that's because the major seventh is closer to the root note that your ear is anticipating, so it's got a stronger pull towards it. Now, if he had played the minor seventh, it could have led up to the root E, or down to the minor sixth, where the phrase might have to continue a bit. And of course, I'm not suggesting that he actively thought this through. In fact, I'm pretty sure he didn't, as George Lynch is known to be a guy who likes to just go for it. But to be able to just go for it with these results, you need a really strong sense of melody and harmony, and a thorough knowledge of the fretboard. So he follows that with another pedal point lick. And this time he's using the root note E as a pedal tone instead of the fifth B as he did on the previous lick. So he starts from the same note that he just ended on, only in a different position. He ends the first part of the solo with this E minor blues thing, and back to Aeolian for those last notes. Most people would just use hammer-ons and pull-offs. But then it would sound like most people. The way he does it is unmistakably George Lynch. It's also more difficult because you have to be very fluid and relaxed with the slides so that they're fast, but clearly articulated. The legato flurry that really makes the solo is actually super simple, as it's just a very basic 4-note pattern that repeats over 3 bars. Playing it correctly and smoothly, however, is an entirely different thing. And that's because the pattern that George is playing requires a stretch from the 12th to the 19th fret, and if that wasn't crazy enough, you then need to move your pinky over to the 20th fret for the second bar, and then back to the 19th for the third. If you're not used to this kind of stretch, I recommend you start off by playing the same pattern, but using the 17th and 18th frets as the top notes, and then gradually build up to the next fret up, and then finally to the 19th and 20th. You don't want to end up injuring your hand as a result of pushing too hard without having the necessary flexibility. And it's always a good idea to take a few minutes to warm up first. So of course this lick stands out in a big way, and it's in part because of the articulation, which makes that relatively simple pattern sound more intense and quite unique, but also because of how it's framed in the context of the solo. So in the first part, we had a little more movement in the accompaniment, and George was playing shorter licks with longer notes. At this point, after a big setup or wind-up, the section opens up with that first whole note chord, and the lead guitar is now playing a continuous 16th note pattern over whole and half note chords, which makes for a very exhilarating 3 bars, and that comes to a climax with this picked 16th note flurry for the 4th bar. In preparing for this video, I watched a lot of live footage of Lynch playing this solo, and he always plays this part slightly differently. And it doesn't seem like he's really going for a specific group of notes throughout. It's more of an idea where the point is to break from the legato pattern while making it sound climactic via picked 16th notes. So you're starting from that high D on the 20th fret and ending on the E at the 19th fret. It's not played super cleanly because a part like this needs to have grit. And you don't get that same feeling if you're trying to be very clean and precise in your attack. So for me, I think it's not only okay to be a little dirty on a part like this, but it's actually preferable. As long as you're not being outright sloppy, of course. The solo ends with two phrases that both feature long bends over 2 bars each. So the first one with double stops, and the second with a gradual 2-step bend that ends on a double stop. So live, he plays those bends and the last note without the double stops. And on the music video, he plays that last note with his trademark slide vibrato. But of course, that's not what you hear on the actual recording. So this is just one of this guitar legend's many great solos. In fact, he was just getting started here. And on the follow-up album, Back for the Attack, Dokken had a much more cohesive sound with stronger compositions and tighter arrangements. And it provided the perfect platform for George Lynch to truly shine. Just listen to songs like Kiss of Death, Standing in the Shadows, Dream Warriors, and of course, the one that would give George his moniker, the very aptly titled Mr. Scary. And if you really want to hear him in his element, check out the live Beast from the East. His fluidity, spontaneity, and creativity on that album are nothing short of astonishing. George Lynch is still shredding, and he's also building his own custom guitars, and he still seems like a really cool dude who just loves music and the instrument. If there's anything about George Lynch you'd like me to cover in a future video, do let me know in the comments, and as always, thank you all so much for watching. Cheers, guys.